Welcome to the Inside Out Money Podcast.
Can't even recognize this place. Too many pieces of our past mistakes.
Hi, I'm Maggie, and I believe real change starts from the inside out. So let's work together to improve our money and our lives from the inside out. We will explore all things money and our relationship with it. Join me each week with a rotating set of co-hosts, friends, and interviews. Let's jump in.
It's time, we going round and round and round and round and round.
Hi, Greg.
Hey, Maggie.
How are you?
Doing okay.
Yeah? You
Yeah.
hanging in there?
Yeah, it's been about 3 weeks since my surgery,
Yeah.
and I'm doing pretty good. You're taking very good care of me, and I really appreciate that. I really dislike wearing a sling.
Yeah, I meant, are you
But-
hanging in there politically, Greg? But
Oh,
yes,
okay.
you did have,
Yeah.
you had shoulder surgery. He had, for anyone who doesn't follow us on Instagram, Greg had shoulder surgery about 3 weeks ago and is down his right arm for a while.
Yeah, another
And,
3 weeks or
yeah.
so.
And he's kind of in this like straight jacket, half a straight jacket. Looks pretty
Otherwise known
uncomfortable.
as a sling, but
Sling. But it's not just your normal sling. It's like an extra serious sling. It's got a lot going on with it. Anyways, I meant, are you hanging in there politically?
yeah, it's been an interesting couple weeks.
It has been. And like my one promise to you in this episode is we are not going to talk about politics and our views on them because I don't know, there's a lot of becauses on that, right? It's a pretty divisive topic lately. I'm not going to change your mind on anything. We're not going to change your mind on anything. We're not trying to change your mind on anything. But we do want to talk about what we all have in common right now, which is we have a new president-elect. What's his name, Greg?
Donald Trump,
Right.
and he will be bringing in a whole new cabinet.
He's
and
already
so
started to announce it, too.
we want to talk about how this will affect your personal finances
Yeah.
over the next 4 years.
Yeah.
Or at least how we think it may. I mean, you know, it's a lot of ifs and no one knows for certain, but
Yeah, well, I mean, you just cut to the chase of like, really nobody knows. So,
that's what I do. I cut to the chase.
yeah. So in case you've been like buried under a rock for a couple weeks, Trump won the election. It doesn't really matter what you think of that right now. And I shouldn't say it doesn't matter because it does matter what you think. We all have a right to have our feelings and, you know, feel how we feel about it. And actually at the end of this episode, if you want something else to look forward to, I'm going to share some resources that I think will make you feel better if you're not excited that Trump was elected. If you are excited that Trump was elected, you don't need anything to make yourself feel better. So I'm not going to help you. But I think for everyone, like the one thing we all have in common is like Trump is our new president and it's a reality regardless of what we think of it. It doesn't really matter what we think of it right now. It is. I was going to say it's happening. But it is. It's already happening because he's already announcing everything and, you know, who's going to be in different seats or who he thinks is going to be in different seats. And, you know, the stock market soared after he won, but history actually shows that happens regardless of who wins. And so that is a common post-election trend. But what we really want to focus on is like, how does this impact you and your personal finances specifically, since in case you sometimes forget, this is actually a personal finance podcast. And we do try to focus on things that will either help your financial mindset or help your tactics. And I actually think this episode will do both because one of the first things to realize is like nobody knows, like we said, right? And, you know, this is a bit of a wait and see situation. I always like to, not just in this situation, but in many things in life, I like to like prepare for the worst and hope for the best.
For me, anytime I'm feeling worried about something or feeling like I don't have control, which is out of our control, is, you know, what the government's going to do over the next 4 years, and then what other external factors are out there that they don't have control over.
Yeah.
Is control what you can control. And so sometimes that's just kind of buckling down and looking at your expenses. And I think anytime there's an opportunity to do that, some change in the government, some change in whatever makes you feel a little uneasy, do what you can do.
Yeah.
Think about your spending, think about your investing, and control those things.
So let's talk about what we do know and what we can start to think about. I'm going to share our take on this based on everything we're reading and everything that's, you know, in the news lately and our own assessment of that. But I also want to share some third-party views on this because it's all kind of saying pretty similar things, I think, in terms of people's kind of, I'd say, predictions or expectations. And I really like Budget Dog on Instagram. I always think people's like handles are funny when I say them. But he's very knowledgeable and professional in this space. And he had a good Instagram post this past week. And I'm just gonna read it to you. He said, the market is expecting 4 big changes: 15% corporate tax rate, major deregulation, new import tariffs, and America First policies. In 24 hours after the election, banks surged 10.8%. Small caps were up 8.6%. The market hit an all-time high. Bitcoin hit an all-time high at 84K, which has actually gone beyond now, I believe. Post-election markets are always chaos. Volatility spikes 27% on average. 54% of election years end in a recession. Why? Because people bet their life savings on promises. They risk their family's future on predictions. They ignore every warning sign until it's too late. Truth is, nobody knows exactly what will happen, not even Wall Street. But we do know this. The people who rush to time politics usually end up worse than if they did nothing. While others gamble on politics, wealthy families do the boring things, the simple things, the things that always work. That's why I'm keeping my strategy simple. Auto-invest in the right ETFs, ignore market predictions, stay invested for decades, and let compound interest do the work. No timing, no guessing, just math. That's the end of what he said. I just really like that because I even think like as we talk about some of these predictions and expectations, it's worth rooting it at the beginning and end in like nobody knows. And our recommendation is to
stay the course.
Stay the course. And if anything, kind of, buckle down a bit, control what you can control, which we'll talk about more. But Greg, what are the other things? Because we'll kind of double click on some of the things that he talked about in here. What do we know and can we start to think about?
So historically, we have market performance data, and it shows that really across both Democratic and Republican presidents, there's similar performance. I think in general, there's not a huge difference, even though many people tend to say Republicans are better at, the business side and developing the economy. There's really pretty good performance against both.
I think people tend to say their party has a positive impact on the economy.
That's probably true.
And what I think is interesting is that it's like, no, we're all right.
Yeah. And we know that, again, recent history is that in Trump's first term, he did a pretty good job managing the economy. I mean, obviously when COVID hit, that caused a major, turn down in the economy. But over his first three and a half years, regardless of whether you like his politics or not, the economy was pretty strong in those first 3 years. So there's a few issues that we know that are going to impact the economy to some extent. One big key issue for Trump is taxes. We know that he reduced taxes substantially in 2017, and we know that he wants to continue to do that. He wants to reduce the corporate tax rate even further, and he wants to make permanent many of the changes that were made in 2017. We also know that the federal deficit is very high, and that those reductions will increase the deficit. So remains to be seen, will he be able to enact all of that? With Republican control of both houses of Congress, that is pretty good likelihood that they will be able to enact that. And generally that should help increase the economy. When there's more money to spend, people spend that money generally. Except for the fired people. We're going to save that money.
Oh, I thought you meant people that get fired. Sorry.
No, I meant I meant fire movement people.
Yes, yeah.
Another key thing is tariffs. Trump has stated that he will put tariffs on all imported goods, especially those from China, with tariffs up to 60%. That could create more problems than it solves. Those tariffs will likely be passed on to the consumer, which will increase prices. That'll be really interesting to see if Trump actually does that. He's also campaigned on reducing inflation. So increasing those tariffs could do the exact opposite thing when it comes to consumer prices. So it'll be really interesting to see how that plays out. That obviously, if those tariffs do go in place, could have a major impact on prices. Yeah,
I thought an interesting estimate that I saw that the Tax Foundation did on the potential impact of universal tariffs to the average household. They actually did an estimate that a 10% tariff would cost the average household $1,253 a year. And a 20% tariff would cost the average household about $2,045 a year. And again, I think people get this, but I've seen some like funny social media videos on tariffs where people don't quite get it. So I do think it's worth just explaining, right? If Trump puts a 10% tariff on all imported goods from China, the country of China is not paying for it. The company that makes that product is going to pay that additional 10% tariff to be able to import their good into the US. And so if their cost increases by 10%, they're likely going to pass that cost along to the consumer. They're not going to just take a 10% hit on their already slim margins likely. And so again, that the assumption is that if tariffs are put in place on other countries, it doesn't just harm the other country. Well, you should say harm is not the right word, but right, it doesn't just pass a cost onto the other country. It also passes a cost onto consumers in the US. Now, I think the way Trump talks about tariffs, I believe it's one of his kind of America first policies. So I believe his intent is to also get, not just to increase the cost to another country, which then passes it on to U.S. consumers. I believe his intent is actually to have more things made in the U.S.
Right.
Longer term, right?
And longer term, that could end up being very good for American workers and jobs. And it may be one of those things where it's short-term pain for the American consumer, but longer term good for the American production and the American worker. So much remains to be seen
again,
there.
It's all wait and see, right? And all of this is where we're totally making some, everyone, I'm not just saying us, right? Everyone is making some assumptions and hypothesizing on what might be happening. And we just don't know. To add to all the things we don't know, there's a ton of geopolitical issues. And how the U.S. plays in the global economy could be impacted by those and by many other things that Trump has claimed he plans to do. And so that could have an impact on the global economy. And we just don't know what it will be because we don't know what he'll do. And I shouldn't just say what the broader government will decide to do and how that will play out.
Another interesting potential change is perhaps more government deregulation or involvement in the cryptocurrency markets. The Morning Brew podcast did a very interesting segment on this, and that the crypto industry became very involved in the election. One of the largest super PACs ever from a funding perspective was a cryptocurrency super PAC that was very involved in supporting Trump and other candidates that they saw as pro-cryptocurrency. This caused Bitcoin to increase dramatically after the election. It's hit an all-time high. And so it'll be very interesting to see what happens with crypto. It has tended to be extremely volatile and something that's risky to invest in. It has made a lot of people a lot of money, but some people have made money and very promptly lost that money. So just something to keep our eyes on. We both sold our Bitcoin, unfortunately, when it was down. We wanted to take a capital loss, and we did get that.
We didn't want to take a capital loss. We didn't ever believe it was going to go back. Oh, we don't say we didn't ever believe, but at the time we were just like, we'll take the loss. Had I, obviously if I could have predicted it getting to where it is now, I wouldn't have taken the loss. But, it is what it is. Do you ever plan on, I don't want to say ever, I don't have a meaningful strategy to plan to buy Bitcoin anytime in the near future, personally.
Yeah, I don't in the short term. I think it is an interesting one to keep an eye on, though, as it matures and perhaps becomes more stable. It may be something that the average investor considers a part of a rounded portfolio. I don't know that we're there yet, but it is something to keep our eyes on because it is certainly maturing as a currency. Yeah,
it's maturing, but also it's like going in a direction of less regulation, which concerns me personally. But it's not that I don't believe there's some future in Bitcoin or in cryptocurrency. It's more that I'm just not in like a gambling mood with my money right now. And that to me is just more of a gamble. And at the time, back when I had a job and I was kind of, it was fun to gamble with some money, that's fine. But I'm just not feeling it right now. While we're talking about deregulation, also with the Republican parties winning across everything, they are more likely to deregulate the tech sector. Or said another way, the Democratic Party was more likely to put more regulation on the tech sector, which in theory has a negative impact on those stock prices because when there's a lot of regulation in your industry, you incur a significantly higher cost. There's a lot less you can do. And for lack of a better word, like with Republicans in charge, good or bad, it's a little bit more like the wild, wild west, right? There's just less regulation, right? And I'd say that against anywhere where there's less regulation. Same thing with cryptocurrency. There's just like a lot more you can do and get away with when there's less regulation. And it doesn't always mean you're getting away with anything bad, but there's just less regulation. And anyone who owns total stock market index funds, which I hope is everybody listening because they're an awesome thing to own, because of the actual makeup of the market right now, you'll hear a lot of people talk about like the Magnificent Seven, and we all own a lot of the tech sector, right? A lot of the biggest parts of the overall stock market right now are Amazon, Facebook, Google, Alphabet, whatever they're calling themselves on the market, and Microsoft and Nvidia, yeah, and
Tesla.
Back to our predictions here, which are not really ours, but they're the world's, are Republicans. But the reality that Trump is in charge and Republicans won both the House and the Senate, there's likely to be less regulation on the tech sector, which will have likely a positive impact on the tech sector.
Okay, the next big topic that is very likely to affect our personal finances is interest rates. And this isn't just specifically a Trump-controlled issue. Obviously, the Fed controls interest rates. We know that they have cut rates twice so far and have signaled that they will continue to do so, albeit somewhat slowly probably. And even though they have cut rates, it hasn't yet had a big impact on mortgage rates and other loan rates. Trump has been critical of the Fed, wanted to see rates cut more quickly. He's been critical of Jerome Powell. Jerome Powell has made it very clear, though, that he will not resign until his term ends in 2026, and that he plans to spend the rest of his term and serve it out. So it'll be really interesting to kind of see the friction between those two and how that plays, and if Trump is able to convince the Fed to reduce interest rates more quickly.
Which he's not supposed to. He's not, when you say convince, he might try, but that's literally you're not supposed to. They are not supposed to take influence from anyone. They are supposed to be an independent arm. And I'm not saying he won't try anyways, but. Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. And obviously some interest rate cuts will help people as far as being able to take out loans, and that's good in many ways. The risk, though, is that you reduce interest rates and perhaps inflation ticks up again. So it's a delicate balance there. Very interesting to see how it plays out with the relationship between Trump and the Fed.
So, Greg, the one thing I'll add to that is I think there's been a lot of observation from analysts and others that are tracking what's happening financially and in the economy, in the U.S. economy, that, are often commenting, it's hard to predict what's going to happen, right? Like the Fed lowers rates to try to stimulate the economy. But even just this week, CPI was announced and it's higher than last month, right? Which has been, it bucked a 6-month lower inflationary trend since they've been lowering some rates. And so it makes people question what is actually needed to stimulate the economy, I guess is the point. And
that the economy is already doing really
pretty well based on a lot of markers, yes.
And Trump's policies are likely to further stimulate the economy and cause economic growth. And so if you do that and you cut interest rates at the same time, you're creating the conditions for inflation to tick back up.
Again, yeah.
So it's very delicate balance between all of these factors. And I think, if the economy is already doing as well as it is with interest rates where they are, some people might say, should we even cut interest rates?
Yeah. And if these topics, I say this a lot, if this conversation that we're having right now sort of hurts your brain a little bit, sometimes it hurts mine. What you need to remember is what we said a couple of times, and we'll keep saying again. You personally cannot control these things. There's a lot of factors, right? Maybe Jerome Powell can control these things, right? He's the Federal Reserve Chair. Maybe Trump can control these things, right? I cannot control these things, right? You'd argue perhaps my vote can, but I'm one of, millions of votes. But I can't control these things. It's a wait and see situation. So all I can do is do some things to prepare, which we'll talk about in a moment. But don't let the complexity of something sort of stop you in your tracks, because you can't control this stuff anyways, right? You can only control what you do, which I'll give some thoughts on in a moment. What's one of the last things that we're thinking about with our personal finances, Greg?
Yeah, one of the big ones for anyone who has retired early and depends on this, or just
entrepreneur,
one of the 20
freelancer.
plus million people that do depend on this if they don't have insurance through their employer, is the ACA. And we know that in Trump's first term, he worked to try to repeal portions of it. They removed the individual mandate and some other portions that were there, but by and large, the infrastructure of it still stayed intact. So we don't know exactly what will happen with that. Will the ACA be repealed or replaced by something else? Or will it be left in place, but subsidies decreased or completely removed? And so that means basically the ACA is this exchange where you can buy insurance that prevents insurers from excluding people based on pre-existing conditions. So theoretically that could stay in place, but the subsidies that are used to make it more affordable for people that are on lower incomes, those could be removed. So you could still have the marketplace, you still could have the protections of pre-existing conditions, but you might not have any government subsidies, so that everyone would be paying kind of the true sticker price for these plans.
Yeah.
So, again, we don't know exactly what direction it will go. And we get our coverage through the ACA. So we're concerned about it.
And we get a subsidy.
And we'll be watching it. I think my takeaway from this is that regardless of exactly the direction it goes, it will probably be more expensive to get coverage in future years after we get through 2025, which is currently already funded through previous government congressional acts. So something to watch. I think something that a lot of people are concerned about, and who knows exactly how it plays out. It's become actually a pretty popular thing regardless of people's political orientation, just because there are so many people who receive coverage through it.
Yeah. And I mean, you said it, Greg, but I often think like, oh, surely they can't take something away that is the way that 21 million plus people, right now it is 21.3 million people use the ACA marketplace for their insurance. Though that sounds like a big number, that is 6.3% of the current U.S. population. So I just always like to think of things in percentages. And, I like to optimistically think like, surely that can't go away in its entirety, but, never say never. I do think it's funny how quickly like people, and I'll use myself as an example, like recalibrate or re-anchor their expectations. So, as soon as Trump won, was like thinking about all sorts of things, my rights as a female, like many things. But I also immediately went to the ACA and I was like, oh crap, this is like a big part of our retirement plan, is that we have good insurance and, we do have pre-existing conditions, and like, this is a really nice thing. And then you even mentioning that, the subsidies could go away. I'm like, I love the subsidy, but I'm also like, oh yeah, I'm fine. And I'll pay full price. I just still want access to good insurance at a, fair price. But it's just funny how quickly I'm like, first I'm just like, oh, ACA could go away altogether. And then I'm like, oh, no, okay, fine. Just keep it without the subsidies and I'll still be happy with that. But we're in a unique position, right? There's other people who couldn't afford it without the subsidies. And so I'll just put, this is one that I hope does not go away. I'll take some tariffs. I'll take that couple $1,000 impact on my household in exchange for keeping ACA. If only it was that simple. If only we could like individually negotiate on what we care about the most.
Yeah. And it's a tough one because, I think most employer-sponsored plans do have different premiums for lifestyle choices. For instance, the simplest one is smoking. If you smoke, often employers will charge you more because that's a controllable lifestyle thing. Many of these pre-existing conditions are not lifestyle related. It's not someone that doesn't eat well, doesn't exercise, doesn't take their medicines regularly. These are things where people were just born with something, and it's really tough to put those people in a position where they just can't get coverage.
Doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
I mean, aside, yeah.
And you could argue, too, that the ability to get coverage outside of employers helps people feel more comfortable starting a new business, leaving a big company to create a business, to own a small business, to become a freelancer.
Yeah.
I think you can argue that there's actually economic benefit to people being able to get plans,
Not
still
be
have
tied
skin,
to W-2 employment.
right?
Yeah.
And you know, they still have skin in the game, even with subsidies. It's a sliding tier based on your income level. So that's just my little pitch on why the ACA is an important plan. And if it is gutted, hopefully something will be put in place that does protect people.
I hope Trump's listening to your pitch.
Yeah, hopefully.
He
You never
probably
know.
listens to this
He
podcast.
could, for
you
sure.
know. Hey. Okay. That was my hey to Trump. Hey, don't take my ACA away. Thank you, Trump. Please don't dump ACA away. Greg's looking at me, but just to be clear, Greg, when Liz and I start singing, Liz is like right in it with me. Greg's just looking at me like, what are you doing?
Yeah, I assume that was just going to be cut from
No, that's
Okay.
going to stay.
Okay.
You must not listen to a lot of Liz and I's episodes lately.
No, I
Admit
haven't.
it.
It's been.
Okay, they're good. They're off script. They're off topic. There's a lot of singing lately. That's all I'm going to tell you. Okay. I don't know how I got there. Oh, I do. I was singing about the ACA. Okay. We are back to a closing segment of this podcast.
Yeah, what are the takeaways from all those points?
Yeah.
We don't know. I mean, we know certain things. There's things that are probably good. There's things that are probably not as good.
Yeah.
And who knows?
And we can't control any of them. This is a wait and see situation. And we won't even know. Yeah, we won't even know the day he's inaugurated, right? This stuff takes time, right? I mean, I will say he's got a good history of like moving quickly on some things, but
most of these things aren't just executive action. They're
they
through
require,
Congress.
yes.
And so even though there's Republican majorities in both parts
still
of
takes
Congress, there's still, many people have input and many people. So it's, even when we say we don't control it, even the president doesn't fully control these things. They drive a lot of influence, but they're still...
Yes, and all of this stuff takes time to enact and to prepare for. And so, again, we can't control things. It's a wait-and-see situation. And this is not just tied to a new Trump presidency. Like, we can't control... the average person cannot control what happens at this level. And so all we can do is try to prepare ourselves as best we can. And so if you're feeling uneasy about this, which many people, regardless of your political beliefs, many people are probably feeling uneasy about their finances, and especially in an unknown, an environment where there's a lot of change happening, right? We're changing from a Democratic majority to a Republican majority, and that with it will incur a lot of change. And so our advice is control what you can control, which is yourself, right? So you can spend more time getting your own house in order and less time catastrophizing about things that we just don't know yet and that haven't happened yet. So like, I'll use the ACA example, right? I can spend time like thinking about the ACA and stressing about it. Like that doesn't do any good. The one thing I can control right now that is impacted by the ACA. I mean, there's probably a couple things. Is one, but I can like get my financial house in order. I can spend less money. I can start to build a reserve thinking, if the subsidy goes away, I'm going to need to budget more on health insurance. I can deal with some health matters, right? I can go to the doctor and I can kind of like take care of as much stuff that I think might be expensive as in the future, right? So I'm using those as examples of like control what you can control, build up your emergency fund, make sure it's sitting in a high yield savings account, make sure, speaking of like Fed interest rate cuts, Wealthfront already, every time the Fed reduces rates, all of the high yield savings accounts very quickly reduce their interest rates. And so instead of the 5.5% we were getting at Wealthfront with the referral, we're now getting 5%. So get that for as long as you can and build up your emergency fund as big as you can. Rein in your spending for a while to do that. Again, I often like just when you're stressed about all the things in the world you can't control, channel that energy into the things you can control, which might be few things, right? Like I can't control my kids half the time, but I can control my spending, right? And I think some like, aside from the benefit of actually like getting more money in your emergency fund, I think the feeling like you're in control about something, like psychologically, also has a benefit.
I completely agree. I think it kind of cascades broader than that too. When when you track your spending and find the places you can control it, some of those things you can change quickly, other things take longer. But as you start to flex that muscle, I think it really does have a positive psychological impact beyond just your spending. And it helps you feel, I mean, you are controlling things you control. Yeah. And I think that's important for a lot of people.
Yeah, I agree.
The next one is continue to max out your 401k.
Or start maxing out your 401k.
Or if you haven't, do. And if you can't completely max it out to the top of your ability. Yeah. It's timeless advice. It's tax advantaged. It's where you want to put that extra money.
It's one of the first things you want to do after you have a healthy emergency fund in place and, high interest debt paid off, is not just a lot of people when they hear maxing out your 401k, they think to your company's match. I'm talking about to the IRS annual limits, which is way beyond your company's match. And so I'll remind people the limit for this year is $23,000 a year. And the limit for 2025 is $23,500. And if you're 50 or older, you can add an extra $7,500 to that as a catch-up contribution limit.
Next thing is just to keep an eye on the market. I think we still believe in kind of the fundamentals of low-cost ETFs. We generally put most of our money in the stock market because I think we're a little willing to take that risk.
We're in it for the long term, right?
We're in it for the long term.
We're in our mid 40s, so we don't care if, we have like almost no bonds because we don't care if the market takes a 30% drop for even a few years, right? We're in this for like what's going on 10 years from now or 20 years from now.
But, for certain people, bonds might be more attractive. And so, just keep an eye on the broader market in general. Diversify if when appropriate. Perhaps someday crypto becomes a part of a balanced portfolio or other elements. So just keep an eye on it in general. Understand the trends of the market and what's going on with it.
The other thing I would say, Greg, just to negate everything you just said, not everything, but I'm just like being silly, is also don't keep an eye on the market if it stresses you out, right? Like I like kind of just keeping an eye on what's going on. It's interesting to me. I'm retired. I have a financial podcast. I don't like to keep too close of an eye on it because it's just too much. There's too much noise out there following everything. But keep an eye on it. And like what's going on in the world. But also if that's stressing you out and causing you a lot of anxiety right now in particular, don't. Total market index fund, right? Or as like Andrew likes to say, VTSAX and chill, which I guess a lot of people say that, I guess. So another specific thing to do to prepare, and we said this at the very beginning, is like hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. And I think you should kind of be doing this like anytime, really, right? Like that's why people have emergency funds. That's why I think emergency funds should be much larger than some people think they should be. And actually, if you're not sure how big your emergency fund should be, Liz and I did a really good episode where Liz gives like a really good formula for how to decide how big yours should be based on some factors in your life. So I would really recommend going and listening to that episode. I'll put a link in the show notes to it. But really, I think so much of what you need to do to prepare is like in your mind and your mindset and just, controlling what you can control and hoping for the best and trying to get through what is a very stressful and anxious time for at least half of the world. I'd say about half of the world, but I think I'm like half joking based on like the election results being fairly close to 50-50. Even the people who voted for Trump and got what they wanted, they probably still have questions about the economy and as things play out, how it's impacting them, positively or negatively. And so my point is everybody in the world or I'd say a big majority of the world is feeling just kind of like anxious about what's unknown and what's ahead and what's going on with the economy. And I think that is a normal feeling right now. And so, do the best you can. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst, rein in your spending, control what you can control. And then a few like bonus things we'll offer you on our way out today. One, missingmoney.com. That's a real website. It's a great name, huh? Greg just found some money on this. So it'll sometimes kick you to like your state's website, but you search on your name, you might be able to find something. Sometimes it's like old money sitting in an escrow account that was never closed, old money sitting with like a utility account that was never refunded back to you. So you can go in and like put your name in your city. It takes like 2 seconds to see. It takes a little bit longer to actually go claim that money, but it gives you like very clear instructions on who is holding unclaimed money and missing money, if you want to call it that might be in your name and sitting out there in the world. So maybe that's like a fun thing that just might make you feel a little better, is like Greg found some missing money and now he's going through the whole claim process.
Yeah, I was excited.
What'd you find? Like $250?
Something like that. Yeah, from an old escrow account.
Yeah. The other thing, like back to my point on like, 50% of the world may be excited right now. 50% of the world may be feeling, sad, anxious, unhappy. I've heard all sorts of adjectives thrown out. And a couple podcasts, Liz Gets Loaded actually got me, recommended both of these. And well, one recommends the other. So there's a This American Life episode that is called A Small Thing That Gives Me a Tiny Shred of Hope. And then they have another episode after that I haven't listened to yet that is called This Is the Cake We Baked. I just love the name of that episode, by the way. It's just a great name. And then there's a podcast called the Tangle Podcast. And actually they have a newsletter too, but it's called Tangle. And they have multiple podcasts that have come out since the election, but one of them is called the 2024 election result. And the podcast in general, what I like about it is that it covers both sides. It looks at news sources that typically swing right and that typically swing left, and really gives an incredibly balanced view of what is going on tied to all sorts of topics happening in our world. And so they specifically talk a lot about the election lately, obviously, but I just think it's a really, like, there is a lot of negative, divisive, hateful content out there from both sides right now. And I shouldn't say right now, always. And I don't like that. I don't think it's like helping make our world a better place. And I really appreciate what the Tangle podcast, and then also they have a newsletter, is trying to do. And when you listen to the This America Life episode about a small thing that gives me a tiny shred of hope is the name of it. And I'll put link in the show notes to all of these. When you listen to that, it actually talks about couples that have been torn apart by their different political beliefs and fathers and sons and like different familial relationships. And they reference actually Tangle. That's how Liz learned about it, was through This American Life. Anyways, I just think if I always try to look for the sunny side of things if I can, the glass half full. And I think some of those podcasts could help you. And again, and you can go listen to content that's just making you angrier if you want to do that. And again, this is not for you. If you're already happy, then like, good for you. You're happy. So
even then,
actually Tangle's great regardless.
Will maybe help see both sides of, the issue, or
it might make you see why your neighbor or friend is.
It's just a nice balanced sort of coverage as opposed to a kind of emotional or
biased view. I think balance is a great word. And so I hope those are some resources that can help everybody. And I think we did it, Greg.
I think so.
Yeah. Okay. Well, as always, we appreciate you listening, and we appreciate all of you, right? Regardless of your political beliefs, I think it's important to make that statement, especially like right now in the world. And I've been a little bit like kicked at times for sharing my political beliefs on Instagram, but I don't share them to make anyone else feel bad, right? I hope everybody in this podcast feels welcome, because it is my intent. And I think everybody should be focused on improving their finances. I think it opens up opportunities and freedom and flexibility in your life and happiness and better relationships and communication and all of that. And so I just want to say I appreciate all of you taking some time to listen to this podcast, and just for listening to this podcast in the past. If you've enjoyed this episode, we always appreciate it if you want to give us a written review on Apple Podcasts, or you can leave us a rating on Spotify too. We really, really appreciate it. And of all the ones, Greg, this is a good one to share with friends or family members.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, it encourages them to it encourages you and them to have more ongoing discussions about money. And I think, again, back to like politics being such a divisive topic lately, I hope what we've talked about here, there's not much divisive about this, right? We're just talking about, how basically we don't know what's going to happen. There's, some things that give us some clues of what's going to happen, but that you should all prepare Right? Remember, hope for the best, but prepare for the worst.
Yeah. Well, if you have any questions, we'd love to hear from you. You can leave a voicemail or text us at 404-981-3370 or hit us up on Instagram.
Awesome. Thank you, Greg.
Thanks, Maggie.
Bye.
Bye.